And now for something completely different.
Oh man, that tempo change hits so hard. G'day folks, welcome back to another episode of Voltz Supreme Synth VGM Dream Stream Machine Podcast, the podcast that plays every now and then the synthiest video game music in all the universe. Well, Jesper Kyd has a new soundtrack out, and guess what? I forgot about it. I was all excited for this new soundtrack, Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. And when it came out, I was busy at the time, and I thought, okay, I'll save that for when I can give it a good listen, thinking, I'll find some time during the week. And it's 2 hours long, so you kind of got to find a nice chunk of time to be able to go through this one properly. And so I forgot to check it out until now. I was like, oh man, I forgot. I better go back through and check out that whole soundtrack. And yep, this is Jesper Kyd, the man I consider to be the king of atmospheric video game music. So let's just do a little episode and check this one out together. This is certainly not one of my favorite soundtracks of his, but it's still really, really good. And he's taken a few of the things he usually does and he's just dialed them up a little bit for this one. And if you know Jesper Kyd, you know that him dialing something up a little bit is actually a pretty big deal, because this guy just goes all out with his music and has some of the nastiest kind of stuff out there. Really expressive and aggressive sounding music, and some really subtle atmospheric stuff as well. But I would describe this particular soundtrack as super atmospheric, super dark, demented industrial dance music. It's not really dance music, but you'll see as we go through a few of these songs that he uses a lot of techniques used in dance music, so some of those flavors do come through, and it's a pretty kind of common theme with the music. So let's check some of these songs out that caught my attention together as dear distant friends. And what we played in with was the Imperium Unites. And let's go to the next song on the soundtrack, Immortal Imperium, from Warhammer 40,000 Darktide by Jesper Kyd. All right, enjoy. Wow, such angry and aggressive sounds. Those synths are just so growly, and obviously, like a lot of these kind of Jesper Kyd soundtracks, just huge sounding percussion all the way through. Also, that choir is pretty important throughout this soundtrack. Personally, I'm not always a big fan of the choir in soundtracks. It can be used really well, but generally I find it to be a bit of a gimmick. Anyway, it sounds pretty good throughout, most of this soundtrack. Some of it I could take it or leave it. Doesn't really matter, but I imagine it's quite effective when used within the game. It probably invokes some certain feelings that are connected to what's going on in the game. So this game, actually doesn't really interest me in the slightest. It just looks really hellish, and I don't care for that kind of thing at all, and I really can't take it seriously either. But I imagine if you're going for hellish, then this soundtrack is most certainly exactly what you want. And Jesper Kyd is just a master at creating these really freaky soundscapes that just sound like they're living, breathing, and growling all around you. It's really quite amazing. You have to listen to this stuff with headphones on for sure. If you're listening to it on a phone, just stop. But it may be in a good sound system in a car, or I don't know, a good sound system, but with headphones on, you really feel like you're inside of this soundscape he's created. So let's get into that a bit more with this next example. And this is a good example of what there is a lot of through this soundtrack. This is just a disgusting track. So many weird and wonderful sounds. It's got all those filthy kind of violin sounds that we used a lot in the older Warhammer games he did. And what I obviously love is the synth. It's just so alive and aggressive. He really manipulates everything in a way that makes it sound really organic, yet so unnatural at the same time. He just creates a really unique kind of sound. So here we go. This is the Transit Horde. Please enjoy. Wow. Absolutely disgusting. But yeah, just so good. I've said it before, but more than anything else, Jesper Kyd's music just takes me places in my mind. And it really, for me, it's just really easy or just kind of natural for my mind to just visualize stuff when this music plays. I don't know if it makes sense, but to me, this is very visual music. I really see all those sounds in my head as I'm listening to them. It must add so much atmosphere to the game and really make it feel really immersive for the player. But, I guess I'll never know. Yeah, man, it's just such tons of freaky, hard-hitting, noisy stuff on this soundtrack. Just really quite horrific, but in all the right ways for a game like this. Also, the sound he creates is just huge in these games. Just so much space. Like, you feel like you're in a large space when you listen to this music. I know with headphones there's a thing called soundstage, and it describes how well the headphones make you feel like you're in the space, in the room, rather than the sound coming from like a vacuum within your head or your ears. Now, when I moved to open back headphones that I am currently using, that means like the headphone speakers are not enclosed. All of a sudden, I really got a sense of good soundstage. Suddenly, all the panning of songs was just super clear, and I could pinpoint the location of stuff really easily, which has helped with my own production quite a lot. It's the reason I got these headphones. But yeah, so there's that side of thing. There's the headphones reproducing the sound. I'm not sure if you describe it the same way when it comes to producing the sound, but Jesper Kyd manages to make some really loud, big sounding music with lots of reverb while keeping so much clarity. And I know it's really easy to lose clarity when you start adding heaps of reverb and cranking everything up really loud. But yeah, Jesper Kyd's production is just top notch when it comes to this kind of atmospheric stuff. So this next track, again, tons of atmospheres, some really amazing synth sounds with tons of character, and you'll hear a bit more of those kind of dancey production techniques with this one that I was talking about. Just kind of these massive pulsating sidechain compression sounds. You'll hear it when it comes in. You really feel it. And we'll talk about it more afterwards. This is Broadcast Apparatus. Please enjoy. Wow, it sounds like you're inside the belly of some machine. You can almost feel the electrons flowing through you with all those really high sizzling frequencies and stuff. Really amazing sounds. Just so many interesting layers on that when you go back and listen to it a few times. So incredibly dense, but like I said, it's all crystal clear and brilliantly produced. I'm not sure how these songs are used in the game. Like with Borderlands, you've got all the kind of individual audio and music stems that are triggered by the events in the game, and then the soundtracks have everything kind of arranged in a way that makes it all kind of make sense like a song. I kind of assume this would be done in a similar way, but I'm not sure. This next one could very well be from a cutscene. It has quite defined parts and sounds like it's emphasizing specific emotions rather than providing just a kind of general atmosphere. So let's check this next one out. This is called Entering Throneside. Very cool and dramatic. A little bit more musical than most of the other tracks. So yeah, I'm assuming that this one is serving a different purpose, much less about the atmosphere and more about kind of supporting the emotions, whatever might be on the screen. Some of those changes have a lot of impact. And up next is another kind of standout one for me, a really different kind of sound to the rest of the soundtrack. It's got this really trippy electronic psychedelic kind of vibe to it, really floaty and dreamy. And I find, little things like the wavering synth tuning really adds to the feeling of losing your mind. Super spacey. I really like it. Let's check it out. This is Transmission Commences by Jesper Kyd from Warhammer 40,000 Darktide. Enjoy. so good. What a trip. Really dreamy kind of stuff, but you've still got a little bit of that creepiness in there with those kind of pulsating synths that come in. They, a bit freaky. Kind of remind me of the sounds that I used to hear in my dreams when I was like, very, very young. Look, he's really got his own sound, and having your own sound is such a big deal when it comes to creativity. Like, you really have to respect that. And look, there's a late night mix of this track, which to me sounds pretty similar, but that's what's playing in the background now. Like the pulsating stuff at the end, it's got that side chain compression, but you can't actually hear what's triggering it. So if you don't know what side chain compression is, I'll briefly describe it. So regular compression is when you set your compressor, we're talking about, audio and volume here. When you set your compressor to a certain point or threshold, so when the volume hits that point, that loudness, the compressor pulls everything back, and you can set how fast or slow that all happens. And sidechain compression is where you compress a sound, or you can do it to a group of sounds, but you're basically using something else to trigger it. So you're using something else to compress another sound. So in dance music, it's really important to sidechain your bass and kick drum. So you put the compressor on the bass sound, might be bass synth or something like that, and control that volume of the bass by sidechaining it to a kick drum. So every time the kick drum hits, the signal goes to the compressor and it pulls back the volume of the bass, letting the kick drum kind of hit hard before the bass instrument has time to kind of come back in and fill in all those frequencies again. So it just gives everything a bit of space to do what it has to do. And contrary to what you might think, you can actually get a much bigger sound by doing this, rather than just kind of stacking all the sounds on top of each other. And I'm actually using it right now. I can get my background music a little bit louder without interfering too much with my voice, by putting a compressor on the background music and using my voice for the sidechain. So every time I speak, it is pulling back the volume of the background music so that my voice can stay at the front of the mix and it's not competing with all the frequencies that the background music is. The frequencies of the background music. It's usually pretty subtle when it's used, just to kind of let those most important tracks stay at the front of the mix a little bit more. But like when it comes to something like dance music, and what Jesper Kyd is probably doing here, he could just be automating volume, but if you crank up that compressor so it's really intense, and then you set the release time, or how long it takes for the sound to uncompress, or for the volume to come back to full, you can set that release time of the compressor so it's in time with the music. And what you're hearing most of the time is the release basically set to the length of a beat. So that kick sound comes in on the beat, pulls everything back, and then it takes a full beat for everything to kind of swell back to full volume. It's pretty effective because it kind of mimics the whole feeling of dancing on the beat. Like when you're nodding your head comes down on the beat, and your head's coming up, and that pulsating effect of the side chain kind of emulates that. Head goes down on the beat, head comes up, the sound swells up and down. I don't know. It's kind of obvious when you hear it. I don't need to explain that kind of stuff, but anyway, it's a fun little trick to use, and it's actually very important in music production. And it took me years and years before I actually decided I would actually try to figure this thing out. It's quite simple, but I don't know why I thought it would be tricky. Anyway, this next one feels like a bit of a continuation of that last song. I would imagine that the previous track would be used, or the previous two tracks would be used in more peaceful kind of exploration areas. And then when things start to get a bit more serious, the bits in this next track start to come in. Really cool. Similar kind of sounds in there, but much more solid, grounded, and less psychedelic with the heavier rhythms and beats and stuff. So this next track is Offworld Auspex. Obviously by the amazing Jesper Kyd. Enjoy. That fantastic stuff. I've actually been researching dance music lately for a project that I'm doing, and it's amazing how dance music is such powerful music, yet it follows a set of rules that are so disconnected from, I don't know, normal music theory. Dance music is just almost completely formulated. It's all formula. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's just so different from, classical music theory. And you think back to last episode and think about how different that music is to the music we're listening to now, which is why I couldn't help but start with that little Monty Python clip at the beginning. I think you know what I'm getting at. Two very different episodes, two very different composers with talent in very different areas. But look, I do have to give extra credit to composers like Jonathan Gear and Masashi Hamauzu, who can do absolutely anything. Like mind-blowing, complex music, classical stuff, and they can dip down into the really hard-hitting, minimal and atmospheric stuff. But still, no one can do music the way Jesper Kyd does. It's something else. That's why I call him the king of atmospheric music. And, well, as I'm starting to ramble about how broad music is, this next one is probably about as dancey as it gets from memory. The tempo is still the same as the last song, so these songs may be connected in the game. It actually reminds me of some of his really early electronic stuff he did on the Sega Genesis, like the Adventures of Batman and Robin. It's very cool, puts you into a bit of a kind of techno trance, but let's enjoy it together. This next one is Warp Traveler. All right, enjoy. Yeah, I really felt like by the time I got to the end of this soundtrack, those undertones of dance music are such a big part of this. The sound of this Darktide soundtrack. Very dark, very atmospheric and gritty, but there's a lot of those pulsating rhythms all the way through. Very cool soundtrack. As always, Jesper Kyd absolutely nails this style, and I'm sure, you know, this soundtrack lifts this game to, you know, lifts the game. Let's just leave it at that. Well, but let's get to our last song. This next one is Disposal Unit Imperium Mix. Now, personally, I actually prefer the original mix more, without all the kind of added voices and stuff, but this one is by far the most popular track with over 1 million plays. So I thought and that's just on Spotify. So I thought I'd stick with what everyone else seems to be liking and play this version. Again, this is a huge 2-hour soundtrack, and we only sampled 9 out of 48 tracks. So if you like it, there's tons more to enjoy, especially those freaky, aggressive soundscapes, which we really only just really briefly touched on. So, yep, folks, nice and short and sweet episode for me this time. Maybe, you know, might be able to make this kind of thing more regular again if I just stick to this kind of thing and don't get too carried away and take things into the depths of the ocean for 3 hours or something like that. And it's good having the Krispy Kraken, you know. I can do my 3-hour adventures into the depths of the ocean on that podcast rather than this one, which really should be focused on the music rather than all the extra stuff. But yeah, we've had a lot of fun over the years, and as long as people are pumping out awesome synthy soundtracks like this, I'm gonna keep doing these little episodes. So it's been fun. Let's enjoy this last track, Disposal Unit Imperium Mix by Jesper Kyd. Remember, folks, stay synthetic.